equilibrium and balance of payments disequilibrium, right? Now, this is a new word that we have introduced, that we got introduced to yesterday, and that is balance of payments equilibrium and balance of payments disequilibrium, right? Now, what is equilibrium, right? So equilibrium is a situation where the country surpluses are offset by its deficits. Now, in very simple words, we will say that a country's balance of payments is in equilibrium when in few years it has surpluses and in few years it has deficits, right? So for any country for which in few years there are surpluses and in few years there are deficits, we call that balance of payments equilibrium. Why is this equilibrium important? We'll talk about all of this in today's class, right? On the other hand, what is balance of payments disequilibrium? Balance of payment disequilibrium is opposite, right? So on the other hand, if a country is experiencing constant deficits or constant surpluses, then it is defined as balance of payments disequilibrium. Are you getting me, right? Now, if you remember yesterday, I gave you example of China, that how China constantly faces, surpluses on its current account and on its balance of payments, and therefore you can define Chinese economy to face balance of payments disequilibrium. Is that problematic? We'll talk about all of this in today's class, right? So students, for now, just remember that balance of payments disequilibrium is when a country is facing constant surpluses or constant deficits. That's all. That's balance of payments disequilibrium, right? Okay, now moving on. Why are constant deficits a problem for an economy, right? So let's talk about this. So the first major problem that we discussed yesterday, that think about this, what's deficit? Deficit is when during a certain year, the outflows of money from that economy was greater than the inflows. So simply speaking, the debit transactions, the sum of debit transactions on your balance of payments is greater than the sum of your credit transactions. More money went out of country compared to what came in, right? How is that a problem? Now, the problem is that it will deplete your foreign currency reserves. How so? Think about this. When you're constantly paying more money and less money is coming into your country, right? Then the currency reserves that your banks hold and your central bank holds, right? They will start depleting. Why? Because think about this. If I'm an individual or I'm affiliated with any business in Pakistan and we constantly import raw material, we constantly import machines, we constantly import other consumer goods and things like that, right? So we are converting our currency into their currency. Now listen to this very carefully, students, right? So that will answer if you have any queries related to or any confusion related to this thing. Think about this. What's a deficit? Your countries, your individuals are constantly importing, right? Let's talk about trade here, right? You're constantly importing. So when you're constantly importing, what does that require? That requires you to convert your currency into their currency, right? So you go to a bank, convert your rupees into dollars, pay for those goods that you're importing, right? So your stock of foreign currency starts depleting in your country. And why is that a problem? That's definitely a problem because in future, when the country has to pay back its international debt, that has to be returned in the currency in which you took the loan in. And that was most probably international currency, dollars, or let's say, pounds or euros or whatever. Are you getting me, right? So is everyone clear on this? Please, right? Do let me know, right? So that's first problem with the deficit, that when you're constantly importing, you're converting your currency into foreign currency. Therefore, the reserves of foreign currency that are held at your country's financial institutions start depleting. Simple, right? Okay, now moving on. Why? What else makes deficit a problem? Right now, we will deep dive into this. Now, listen to this carefully. Now, we will talk specifically that why each of these accounts deficits is a problem. Students, stay with me, right? Now, initially we discussed that why is deficit a problem? Why overall deficit of balance of payments is a problem, right? So overall balance of payments deficit is a problem because more money is flowing out of your country compared to what is coming in. The foreign currency stock that your country holds will start depleting, and that means you don't have this foreign currency available in future to pay off your debt. Simple, easy, right? Okay, now we are diving deep into each of individual account deficits. How is that a problem? So current account deficit. Now students, think about this. Who will tell me, and that should not be a problem, so I want inputs from everyone, if a country is facing constant current account deficits, can you give me a possible explanation for that? Think about this. So knowing this much of economics and knowing how balance of payments work, now my question to you is simple and easy. If there's a country who is facing constant deficits on its balance of payments, these are the things written right in front of you. Can you give me possible explanation that why would a country face deficit on its balance of current account? Sorry, only on its current account. That's what we're talking about. Why would a country face constant deficit on its current account? What could be some possible explanation? Your imports are more. That's correct. Mathematically, that's correct. That's the first part, right? Zohan is saying imports are greater than exports. Now, can you give me a reason why would that be the case? Why would that be the case? Quickly, think about this. Think about this. Why would your imports be constantly more than your exports? Should not be difficult. Country produce products are less competitive in international market. Good explanation. Investment in foreign countries. Khadija. Okay. Think about this. Where do we record investments? Students, do we record that in current account? Sorry if I, phrased question incorrectly. We are talking only about the current account, right? Khadija, we're only talking about the current account at the moment. We'll come to financial account and capital account in a bit. Your exchange rate is higher. Very good point. Very good point, Zohan. Right, no worries, no worries. That's correct explanation, but that would be for the financial account, Khadija. Okay, now think about this. 2 points that we have come up with, students have to pay close attention, right? Now, the first reason is very simple and obvious, right? When would your exports be more? Your exports would be more when your products are more competitive, right? Which countries export? A lot. China, Japan, UK, USA, right? And so on, right? Now, what is common in these countries, right? Now, I will come to that, John. Okay. Now, the idea is, let's talk about China. Chinese products are one of the cheapest in the world, perhaps the cheapest in the world. Why? Their costs are low. How that is low, that's a debate for another day, right? But obviously their labor is cheap, their raw material is cheap. It's a huge country with so much supply of raw material, so much land available, so much natural resources available and all these things, right? So that's what makes China cheaper than other countries, right? So when you produce a product which is cheaper, so think about this, let's talk about a simple example. So, and this is what we'll talk about in the upcoming topic as well, which is international trade. Think of Apple. Apple is a US based company. Where is its most production taking place, right? In China. Reason being simple, cost of production is low. Are you getting me, right? So when countries' products are less competitive. Now, if any one of you are new to economics and this word is bothering you, competitive. Competitive could be on different dimensions. That could be on cost. We were talking about cost at the moment, right? We discussed the point of cost. If cost is less in a country of producing an iPhone in China compared to what it takes to produce in USA, then obviously it's better for Apple to locate in China rather than to produce in USA. As simple as that. Are you getting me, right? Similarly, if Chinese taxes are lower than the taxes that they take in USA, where would iPhone want to locate? China. Are you getting me? Because of cheap labor available and low trade protections. Yes, that's correct, right? Very nice, right? When a country's products are less competitive, right, due to higher labor costs or less business friendly policies. You understand this word? Like higher taxes, higher corporation taxes, right? And I mean, I don't know if you follow news or not. I mean, these bigger corporations, I mean, US is the biggest economy in the world, but these companies are so big, so big. In COVID, these companies literally threatened their government. I'm talking about Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, right? These companies threatened US government that they will relocate if they ask them to pay taxes. And their explanation, their justification for not paying taxes during COVID was that, we are not earning, we didn't earn that much revenue, we didn't make that much profit. Are you getting me, right? So just imagine a company, making such strict, asking for such things from, government of the largest economy in the world, right? But then the government had to accept their demands because, I mean, just imagine how much worth of profit they are contributing to the revenue, how much worth of jobs they are creating and things like that, right? So this is, I keep giving you these examples so that you can understand how economics play in real life, right? Are you getting me? Okay, so when a country's products are less competitive due to high labor cost or less business-friendly policies, or less supply of raw material, which automatically makes it expensive. Right? Are you getting me? Right? We good on this? Okay, that was the first thing. Now think about this. Another thing that Zohan said, and that's very valid point, that what about your exchange rate? So once we covered exchange rate topic right before this topic, right? So exchange rate is value of one currency in terms of another, right? If a country's exchange rate is stronger, right? Would it be easy for that country to export? Right? Can you see my screen, students? Right? So I'm just searching that what this is, right? Now think about this. $1 buys 3 Chinese yuan, right? So an American has to pay $1 to buy, and he gets to buy goods worth 6.36 Chinese yuan in China. Yes or no, right? Now, since Chinese currency is relatively cheaper or relatively weaker, you can say, compared to dollars, so for American, Chinese products are cheaper. Yes or no? This is making sense, right? So the idea is with stronger currency, your products will automatically be not very affordable. They will be more expensive for foreigners. How so? Because they will, when they will convert their currency into your currency, they need more units of their currency to buy 1 unit of your currency, making your products more expensive. Are you following me or not? Students, are you following me? Right? So let's think of it from Pakistan's point of view. Quick example, right? So let's say something is worth $10 in USA and something is worth 10 pounds in UK. Let's think of an example real quick and then move on. $10, something is worth $10 in USA and something is worth 10 pounds in UK. I'm a Pakistani person sitting in Pakistan. I want to import, right? Now, which country should I import it from? So the idea is fairly simple, right? So what I will do, PKR is Pakistani currency. So let's first look at the exchange rate at USD, right? So if I have to pay $10, right? So that makes 1,764 Pakistani rupees. Easy. $10 are converting into 1,764 rupees, right? Now, all I have to do is to convert this into pounds. So now when I do for pounds, right, 10 pounds will cost me 2,400, almost 2,401 rupees, right? So which of the two countries is more expensive for me as Pakistani? UK is more expensive. So I'll prefer to buy from US rather than UK. This is making sense. Political effects like Pakistanis refuse to buy France products. Yes, we'll definitely talk about that. Yeah. That does make a difference, but I mean that should be a bigger enough of a campaign. I mean, you're right, Zohan, and we'll talk more about it when we'll start the next topic of international trade, right? Okay, students, are you getting me? Easy. Okay, now moving on. A country's exchange rate is stronger, right? Easy. Relatively stronger. Okay, let's keep moving. Okay, now these are the 2 points that we have identified for current account deficit. When a country's products are less competitive because the cost of producing products in that country are higher. Why? Because labor is more expensive, there's less supply of raw material, which obviously makes it more expensive, or there are less business-friendly policies like companies' taxation are higher and things like that, right? Okay. Then another major reason for less exports of a country is that your exchange rate is relatively stronger, which makes your products more expensive for foreigners. Easy, we good on this? Okay. Then another thing. Now this is very important. Think about this. What type of products you are exporting and what type of products you are importing? Don't you think that will make a difference in the value? Because we're not looking at the quantity. In balance of payments, we're not looking at the quantity of the goods that you're exporting and importing. We're looking at the value of goods that you're exporting and importing. This is making sense. Embargo in return, the other countries also impose trade protection, causing less exports. Yeah, but Johan, in that case, both your exports and imports are being reduced, right? So if Pakistan has imposed embargoes against, let's say, Iran or any other country, then neither we are exporting anything to Iran, neither we are importing anything. I mean, that does make a difference, but I mean, the two things are kind of canceling each other out. But yeah, that does make a difference, right? Are you getting me? Now, just for now, I want you to focus particularly on, why you're always importing more value of goods, why you're always importing more valuable goods and you're exporting less value of goods. That's how you should frame it in your mind. Okay. Any confusion so far, students? Now think about this. What type of products countries like Pakistan export? By the way, I do realize sometimes that, it might sound that, there's nothing good about Pakistan's economy, but I mean, since I'm a Pakistani, I'll talk more about our economy, right? And it's better that we are more familiar about our country's, shortfalls rather than someone else. Okay, sports goods. Yeah, we export sports goods, we export agricultural goods, right? Agricultural goods are major exports, sports equipment, surgical instruments, and all these things, right? Now, think about this. These are relatively low value added goods compared to the goods that we import. We don't export oil. I mean, we import oil. We don't export machinery. We import machinery, right? Yeah, we don't export cars. We import cars. Now, these are some very expensive items that we have to import every year. Cars, uh, components of cars, what else? Machinery, factory machinery, and things like that. And then what was the third thing? Oil, right? And perhaps some of the raw material as well. Not really sure, right? So the idea being that the goods that a country is exporting, if those are less valuable compared to the goods that it's importing, then obviously that will make it suffer current account deficit. Are you getting me, students? Is this making sense? Right? Okay. When these exports are less value added, like agricultural products or low, less processed, manufactured goods imports are more added, like right, like services. Services are often value added, more value added, and more processed manufactured good. Are you getting me? Easy? Any confusion so far? Anything that's not clear? There was a comment. Let me read that. Right. Okay, great. Are we good on this? Right. So what should the country do? We'll also talk about now. We have discussed like what causes current account deficit, but this is also part of our syllabus to know that what remedies a country can do to overcome those problems. Right. So I think it's better that we discuss it right here. Solutions for current account deficits. Right now, since you already know what problems cause, what things cause current account deficit. So let's quickly discuss that what are possible solutions for a country to, overcome or reduce these deficits. Current account deficits, right? So let's talk about that. Okay, now let's see what you got here. The tax on importing cars goes into foreign reserves to compensate the deficit in BOP. The tax on importing cars goes into foreign reserves to compensate the deficit in BOP. I mean, okay, I get what you're trying to say, Zohan. Yeah, it can eventually. Yeah, you're very right. Because think about this. All these taxes, whether that be customs, whether that be indirect taxes, whether that be income tax, whether that be corporation tax, that's revenue for the government. That's government revenue, right? So that's the money that the government of your country gets when they impose taxes. Now, with more revenue and less expense, Johan, you would remember, right? So when a government earns more revenue because taxes are more and government spending is less, and that is what we'll talk about in the next unit when we talk about fiscal policy, right? When we talk about macroeconomic policies. But to answer your question, yes. So when revenue of government is more and expenses are less, so government is in surplus. That's called budget surplus. That's called budget surplus. So that money could be converted into foreign reserves later on. That's correct. That's correct. Is this making sense? Right? Right? But then still it's not as effective. It's still not as effective, Zwan. So the idea is fairly simple that first of all, when you're imposing customs on your import of any product, right, whether that be cars or phones or whatever, right? I mean, it does generate revenue for the government, which is good, right? But I mean, it happens every year. It happens every year. Why don't you try to substitute, replace those imports with locally manufactured goods? And that's what China is doing. That is what China has already done. And that is what India is doing now. Are you getting me? Right? I mean, so when you have your own equally good products, why would people want to import right? So India has already launched its own car, Tata Group, which is one of the biggest corporations in India, right? His owner is easily a billionaire, right? So I mean, they are manufacturing cars, and China has amazing cars. I mean, which you all see on the roads now, MG and all that, right? So I mean, it's just a matter of time. So this is very interesting. It might be of interest to you as well. I was in Michigan in USA. I was talking to, we ran into a Chinese guy, and we were talking with him, and all of a sudden the discussion started about cars. I don't know how, but we started discussing about cars. So he said that China has very impressive SUVs. SUVs, you would know. I mean, the big cars, right? Don't know much about cars, but that's what I know, like Fortuner, big cars, right? And I was like, yeah, okay. I was just thinking that if they have such impressive SUVs, why don't we see it, in other countries? And I mean, perhaps it was 2 or 3 years down the lane, and now MG is a Chinese car, and then there are a couple of other brands that we see on the road. I mean, so I mean, that's good enough of car, and that's why Pakistani consumers are buying it, right? I mean, given the price, it's good value for money. So that's what I want to say, right? So that's the idea. So when you keep improving, I mean, it's not all of a sudden that Tata can start exporting cars, because there's a lot of competition out there. Toyota is there, I mean, for affordability, BMW, Mercedes on the higher end. But sooner or later, when they constantly keep improving their quality, constantly adding more features, and it's good value for money, then who knows, right? In future, Indian cars might be seen in other parts of the world, and so on, right? Are you getting me? So this is the type of okay, now moving on. Students, what's the solution for current account deficit? We have already discussed the first one, right? The first one is that the products that you're importing, right, you try to produce local substitutes. I mean, except for few for which you cannot, like if Pakistan doesn't has enough oil reserves, we can't produce oil, right? We have to import, right? It's a raw material which we can't produce, right? But for other things like cars and machinery, and let's say, I don't know, technology, and things like that, clothes or whatever consumer products we import, we can start producing local substitutes for that. Right? Are you getting? Sectors to replace with manufactured goods. Students, are you following me? Easy. Similarly, every year, a lot of students from a lot of students from developing countries go to foreign countries for education. Why so? I mean, why can't, you can have good enough of institutes in your own country? So that, I mean, this is also an import of services, because when a student from your country goes to a foreign country, they're paying insane amounts of money, which in future might be of benefit to you. I mean, if your country nationals start becoming CEOs and so on, right? But I mean, it doesn't pay off that much, given those students would have studied in your own country, uh, and so on, right? Are you getting me? So these are the things that you should be thinking about. Okay, so again, that was one point. Another solution linked to overcome current account deficit, which was related to your country producing less value added goods and exporting less value added goods compared to importing more value added goods, right? So uh, developing industry linkages where your products processed to increase value addition. Students, are you following me? Right. So another thing that this country can do is to create industry linkages to increase value addition and so on. Right. What do I mean by that? So even if you're a developing country and you produce agricultural goods and all that, so instead of exporting raw, instead of exporting raw vegetables or raw fruits and so on, if you're producing fruit juices, and if you're exporting canned food, and if you're exporting canned fish and things like that, right, then that will get you more money, more revenue compared to just exporting it raw. Yeah, that's correct, Zwan. University of Michigan, right? Okay, is this making sense, students? Right? So these are all the things that you should be thinking about, right? Thank you. Okay, so what else? What else is coming to your mind? Imports value added, like, right? Okay. Um, so this is the thing. Okay, as far as the exchange rate is concerned, now that is tricky. Now that is tricky, students. I would not say that changing a country's exchange rate is in the government's hand. Technically it is, but you can't really do that. If you remember while we were talking about, right, because here another point that we have mentioned, that your exchange rate is stronger. So you all might be thinking that a country can, lower its exchange rate so that its products become relatively cheaper and things like that. But it's not that easy. Why so? Let me explain you, right? I mean, I might have mentioned that when a country uses fixed exchange rate or managed exchange rate other than free floating, right, then other countries can have serious objection against that. And China always face allegations from USA, especially that China is artificially keeping its exchange rate weak, right? Now, what that means, right? International Monetary Fund, right? World Trade Organization, you would have heard about, right? So there is this organization called World Trade Organization, WTO. So WTO is kind of a regulatory body for all international trade that takes place, right? And if a country has objection with any other country, objection against any other country for any of the practices that that country might be using, then that is taken to the court at World Trade Organization, and then the court decides that what should be a reasonable settlement, right? So similarly, USA time to time accuses China of artificially artificially keeping its exchange rate weaker so that their exports could be more competitive, right? So that's why it's not a very good situation to be in, because if you get caught, or if other countries suspect that you are artificially keeping your exchange rate weak, then that can be some problem for you. Government to invest in supply side policies, making the production cost to be lower. The productivity will increase, causing the products to be more competitive in international markets. Absolutely correct. Right. Okay. So another thing that Johan has just mentioned, and that is kind of linked to what I was saying, right? Improving your supply side policies, right? So students, this most probably this will be a new word for you, because you haven't heard before and we haven't studied it yet. We will study this in the last unit, which is macroeconomic policies. Now, supply side policies, but I'll quickly give you an overview. So students, supply side policies are any policies that help a country, that are targeted at improving the aggregate supply of that country, right? Write this down. Government policies or initiatives targeted at enhancing the country's production potential, right? Now, what do we mean by this, right? So the idea is there a single T? Okay. Now, the idea is that if your policies, if your government policies are business friendly, right? That means that you do not charge very high rates of taxes to your, let's say, consumers, plus to your businesses, and you're facilitating your businesses. You are encouraging investments in sectors where you lack, like for instance, I mean, if Pakistan knows that every year we're spending so much money on importing cars, and perhaps we can encourage local businesses and companies to invest in auto sector. Similarly, if every year we spend a lot of money importing consumer electronics, I mean, consumer electronics should not be a rocket science to produce, right? If we have to import things like vacuum cleaners and microwave ovens and things like that, right? Then government should encourage investment. How do you encourage investment, right? You give businesses incentives. How do you give incentives? Let's say for the first 10 years, you say that we will not charge you any tax. Whatever money you make, that's all yours, right? So, I mean, now since profit margins are higher for businesses, right? After this policy has been introduced, profit margins are higher, and therefore there will be more investors will be interested in investing in such space. Are you getting me, right? So all these things help boost investment in those sectors where you desperately need it, right? Lower the interest rate, which will increase investment in the country. Absolutely. That's more of monetary policy. But yeah, that's correct. That's correct, Preet. Oh, sorry, Zohan, right? Okay. Any government policies and initiatives targeted at enhancing the country's production potential. Are you getting? We'll talk more about it. Okay. Now, let's quickly sum this up and then keep moving forward, right? So the main reason, students, right? why you face current account deficit. Because in current account, and again, think about this. If you remember, so current account is made up of 4 sections: trade in goods, which records how much worth of goods you exported and how much worth of goods you imported. That's what you record in trade in goods. Then you have trade in services. Trade in services similarly records how much worth of services you exported and how much worth of services you imported, right? Then you have income. Income records the income on the credit side, which is an inflow, records how much income your national earned, how much income your nationals earned by working in foreign countries or by running a business in a foreign country or through their investments in foreign country, like invested, a Pakistani has invested in US stock exchange and, have some property there. So if they earn any rent, blah, 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 right? So that is written on the credit side because technically that is money flowing into your country. And income also record income of foreigners working in your country through the same channels that we discussed. Like they might be doing a job in Pakistan, they might have investment in Pakistan and they're earning some profit on that. They might have some property in Pakistan and they might be earning some rent on that and so on, right? So that is what income section records. And the last of all was current transfers, which you would remember, records unilateral transfers, one-way transfers. If government is receiving aid from another country, then that is recorded on the credit side. But if they're giving aid to another country or giving loan to another country, that's recorded on the debit side because that's outflow. And current transfers also records individual unilateral transactions, like any of your family member sending you remittance, Chinese or whoever working in Pakistan sending remittance to their country back home. So that would be on the debit side. Easy. But still, you would be wondering that why we are only focusing on trade in goods and trade in services. In the problem that we identified, students, in the problem that we identified, that why current account deficit actually happens. So all of these 3 points are related to trade. All of these points are related to trade, not much related to income, not much related to current transfers. And the reason is simple and obvious, that trade is making the biggest proportion of your current account. Is this making sense, right? Trade is making the biggest proportion of your current account. So just imagine the goods that are being exported and imported between countries are way more valuable compared to the income that Pakistani nationals are earning abroad or what foreign nationals might be earning in Pakistan. I mean, there will be huge difference, right? Are you getting me? So is everyone clear on this? Any confusion so far, students? Right. So then we'll talk about, if this is clear, then we'll talk about capital account deficits, right? So why they are capital account deficits. Now think about this. First of all, you have to recall that what is recorded in the capital account. Now, if you remember, let me show you the definition. So capital account records excuse me, individuals sale and purchase of property assets. For instance, if our country national purchases a property abroad, then it will be a debit entry because the money is flowing out of your country. Okay. Now it's again, capital account is not very it doesn't record a lot of value of transactions. I mean, relatively transactions are smaller because it's neither investments by businesses nor it is international trade as we record in current account, right? So these amounts are relatively smaller compared to overall balance of payments, but obviously we can't ignore that, right? Now, what could be a possible reason? That's a good point, John. That's a good point, right? More loans are available, more, what do we call that, right? So there are more financial products available in other countries, which makes buying property or acquiring property easier compared to your country. So that's why your nationals are always interested in buying property abroad and not buying property back home. But something more fundamental than this. So what do you think is the reason why your nationals, so let's put it in very simple words, why your country nationals are always interested in buying property abroad rather than buying property in their own country, right? Could there be a reason for that? What do you think? Could be, yeah, Zwan. So Zwan is saying lower exchange rate will attract people to buy property. I mean, yeah, but think about this. I mean, property is already something very expensive. So minor changes in exchange rate might not, I mean, until unless you're investing in a country, like, don't want to say this, but I mean, this is a reality, right? Until unless you're investing in, some African country, right? The other day I was looking at, because a lot of students sign up on mega lecture from Africa, right? Their currencies, I got the chance to, look at their currencies, that their currencies are very weak. So Zimbabwe dollar was, I think, relatively stronger. Right. Relatively stronger, yeah. But other currencies were quite weak, right? Okay, okay. So let's keep moving forward, right? Yeah. So the idea is, students, where were we? Okay. Now, why is it always that your country nationals are buying property abroad and not, in your country? And similarly, foreign nationals are also buying in their country and not buying in your country, right? Because the idea is this has something to do with political stability of an economy and, general law and security situation, right? As simple as that, right? So if there is someone who is national of Pakistan and UK, right? And that person preferred to live in UK, buy property there. Are you getting what I'm trying to say, right? So perhaps higher living standards or, more property rights. I mean, that's another thing that's very, that's very important in this case, because I've personally known cases where, in Pakistan, property rights are not that much enforced. There are always cases going on, right? Like court disputes going on about, this is my property, that is my property. I mean, so the legal system is slow. These disputes are not resolved. It takes years, like literally generations, right? So things like that. So why would anyone want to invest in Pakistan where they're not secure, whether like they're not sure whether their investment will be secure or not? Are you getting me, students? Are you following me, right? So it's simply because, right? Write it down like this: higher living standards abroad and more property rights, uh, more enforcement, property rights in foreign countries for capital account deficit. Students, are you following me or not? Is everyone clear on this? Right? Do let me know if at any point you are feeling lost. Right? Now, quickly, let's discuss this. What would be possible reasons of reducing your capital account deficit? Right? Okay. Now, the idea is simple here. Until unless you don't improve your law and order situation, and until unless you don't, make your country more livable country, right? I mean, this is nowadays a term, right? How livable a city is, how livable a country is, right? Right. So that is what will, like, until unless you don't do that, you can expect your current account to be in deficits. But still, to be very honest, countries are not very much concerned about that. Again, reason being, I mean, because that's not making huge proportion of your balance of payment, right? Right? They might be concerned, but not as much as they will be concerned about their current account deficit, or as much as they will be concerned about their financial account deficit. So they're not concerned that much about their capital account, right? Um, reasons to country. This is making sense, right, students? Are we good on this? Okay. Then we come to the third and the last type, like the last account of balance of payment, which is financial account. Okay. Now, students, the class is about to end, but we can stretch it like 5-10 minutes more. So if you are interested, I'll end the class, you rejoin it, and we'll quickly complete off with this, and then we'll be done with this topic. And then tomorrow we'll start off with the new one, right? So, okay. So I'm ending, rejoin it with the same link.